broadcasting your call. All right, thanks everyone. I'll be giving a presentation that I'll be doing in beginning of August out at Midwest Dreaming. I have about 30 minutes of content, so if you have any questions or you want to interrupt along the way, feel free to. We can go a little bit deeper since we have plenty of time tonight. What we're going to take a look at really is how we can unleash the power of the compare table inside of analytics. And you guys know me, so I don't really need to introduce myself. But one thing I want to draw out is I've been working a lot with analytics and actually have an app on the App Exchange that's geared towards the financial services industry and specifically real estate. So for anyone who's not familiar with Einstein Analytics, perhaps you know it better by its older name, in this case, Wave Analytics. There was a recent rebranding of Analytics Cloud this past week, so the name's kind of changed from Wave to Einstein. And what it's really designed for is it provides insights from visualizations. What this means is data can come from any source. It's really good at pulling in data from Salesforce, but you can also take it from external systems, Pardot, Marketing Cloud, Postgres on Heroku, Amazon Redshift, or even things on site. The next thing it does is it provides contextual answers. What that means is you can embed these dashboards right along with business decisions. You do that in Classic, Lightning, or even Communities. And last of all, there's a mobile component. You have the ability to take your analytics on the road with you to get these insights and then collaborate with the rest of your organization through Chatter and those type of capabilities. From a functionality standpoint, there's really a couple of different things. There's the Einstein Analytics platform, which is really an empty environment where you can build whatever you want. There's also then topical apps. This can cover Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, B2B marketing, and then partners will build apps as well too. And then last of all, there's Einstein Data Discovery, which builds in artificial intelligence to give you insight to your answers. So let's take a look at one of the most fascinating, most interesting parts of Analytics Cloud, the compare table. I will bring that up. It is a little bit of a lag with what's coming up on the screen. But there we go. I give you the compare table. What an awesome visualization, right? A row of data. You're like, hey, can we go downstairs to Bell Hall now? But look, it gets better. So maybe what I'll do instead of just showing you a compare table is I'll show you what you can build with the compare table. So I have a dashboard that brings in a lot of different components for you. It takes a look at things like your win rate, your top accounts, what your cumulative sales look like. We have a year-over-year change, and then we even have min-max average deal size by industry. Now, everything on this dashboard I built with a compare table, all through declarative work inside of Analytics Cloud. We didn't have to write any SQL, the Salesforce Analytics querying language. So let me walk you through how we can make that lowly compare table into something much more impressive. We're going to start with a couple of basics about the compare table. Unlike some of the other visualizations inside of analytics, this will give you actual data in rows and columns. So what we can do is we can add a grouping by industry, and we'll have multiple rows of data. The other thing that we can do is we can add multiple columns. So instead of adding just the count of rows, I can come up to my measures section and add in the sum of amount. One of the other things that's kind of cool that you can do with a compare table is instead of looking at numbers themselves and sum of amount, you can change this to look at bars. So if you click on the sum of the amount and shows bars, it behaves kind of like a spark chart, if you will, where you have those individual values inside of it. The other thing that's important to know is when you're working with a compare table, down at the bottom, you can filter each column independent of each other. When you're dealing with other visualizations, the filter that you apply goes against the whole chart. But in a compare table, it's only one row at a time. We're going to take a look in a little bit at how that can be very powerful to us. And then last of all, you can go up to the settings and you can actually show totals on your compare table. And what this will do is it'll add up the values in your rows. Now, a word of caution on this, we'll take a look at when we start putting in some formulas. This doesn't take and apply the formula in aggregate, it just sums up your columns. So there's some places where that can be problematic. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at how we can see what we have in this chart, but instead of looking at just as numbers, how we can see it as a visualization. So if we go up to the chart icon next to compare table, we can actually pick one of the visualizations inside of analytics and see that chart or see the compare table charted that way. In the past, it was a little bit more obscure how you did this, but with the summer 17 release, it's right out in front, so it's easy to look at your count of rows, so how many opportunities you had, as well as the amount that you want. First thing I want to take a look at is how we could actually get a win rate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually switch back to a compare table. And I'm going to look at it by industry. So I'm going to add a second row, which is also count of rows, but I'm going to filter this one where 1 equals true. So what this gives me is all my opportunities by industry, all of my 1 opportunities by industry. Now here's where some of the power starts coming in. We're going to add another column and edit it. And when you get into the edit mode, you now have a formula editor. So this is really starting to behave like an Excel table where you have different columns at the top, A, B, and C, that you can use in a formula. So for us to compute a win rate, we're going to take B, the 1 opportunities, and divide by A. We'll call it win rate. And down at the bottom, we'll change the formula, the format from number to percentage. Go ahead and apply this formula, and you'll see that the data on the left will update automatically to match this value. I mentioned before the totals, 1,000% win rate. That would be awesome, right? Except it doesn't make sense. So once you start doing formulas, we actually want to come back into the table and go ahead and hide the totals. So let's take a quick look at this as a column chart. So after hiding our totals, we'll click over onto the chart and see what our win rate looks like. Now, this is great, but I'd like to actually just see the win rate, which is easy enough to do. If you go up to the measure section, you can actually hide the individual columns that were part of your calculation. So what that'll do is after I hide both of these, we'll end up with just the win rate. And you're not tied into just one type of chart. If you want to look at this as a dot plot or line chart, you can change your data the way it's visualized to your liking. Now, I'm kind of particular about my data. So if I start looking at this chart, when it goes back to a bar chart, there's something that bugs me. The numbers are all kind of 2 decimal places. I don't need to know my win rate down to the thousands or the hundreds. I just need to know the tenths. You can guess. We're going to fix that by going back to our compare table. And we're going to start enhancing the formula a little bit. We come in and we edit our formula. One of the things you're going to notice when this pops up is that the section's kind of grayed out. I can't actually change the formula. When your formula is the first column in a table or the only column in a compare table, you actually can't edit it. So we're going to actually add back one of the rows by showing it and then jumping into the compare table formula editor. So if you ever get stuck, that's kind of a trick. Add back a second column and then you can go and edit it. What happened between spring and summer is the Explorer was completely redesigned. So it doesn't look anything like the previous version. I think in that process, there's a few of these little details that are still needing to be worked out in upcoming releases. So you'll see some enhancements come along the way because you should be able to edit the formula in that scenario. So I'm going to add a round statement. We have some formulas that we can use in addition to just A over B. This function will take and round your data, in this case, to 1 decimal place. So I'm going to click apply, and my data will be updated, and everything will be perfect. Ta-da! Okay, something's going on here, right? I'm getting 70s instead of what I thought of something point something. So let's take a look at what's actually going on. Instead of looking at this as a percentage, we'll take a look at it as a number. And you can see right away that once it changes over, it's actually being stored as a decimal. It's just the display that's turning it into a percentage. So if we want to see 2 decimal places, we're actually going to do a round by 3 and then change it to a percentage, and then everything will look better. There we go, 1 decimal place, just like we wanted to see. One of the things that we want to look at next is maybe how our win rate has changed over time. That gave us a good idea of month to month, how things have varied, but we weren't necessarily able to see it compared to this year and last year. So we can fix that. What we're going to do is we're going to go and change our grouping. And instead of looking at things by account.industry, we're going to look at close date month. And you'll notice right away kind of the data isn't necessarily what you want to see because all the different years worth of data is kind of commingled together. But we have the ability to fix that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my win rate. I'm going to add 2 more columns. I'm going to add a copy of count of rows. I'm going to add another copy of count of rows. And the thing that you may have noticed is win rate's now 100%. What happens is when you start adding columns to your compare table, the formula doesn't move with you. So before when we divided B versus A, well now B and A are the same values because I added a duplicate column, so your formula changes. So if you start dealing with columns before your formulas, keep in mind that you may have to go back and adjust them. So to start with this first count of rows, let's turn this into the data for last year. So from a close date perspective, I'm going to pick a date filter, and I'm going to use a relative date filter. The nice thing about a relative date filter is it lets you look at data from a set time range. So in this case, I'm going to go back last year, and it will pull all of 2016. Now, as we move into 2018, last year would become 2017 and so forth. So it's something that can be set up without a user needing to provide any intervention in the dashboard. I'm going to do this to my other columns as well, too. Now, because I have a lot of columns in this grid, I want to go and actually change some of their labels so I can keep track of them. If you go up and edit a column, you can actually change the name. After we put these to 1 this year, 1 last year, what we'll do is create another formula. And you can see my columns are kind of out of order now because of how I arranged it, F, A, B, C, D, E. So E, we will turn into 1 this year, divided by all for this year. And I typed them in the wrong way, but we're not going to go back and fix it. So this is our win rate. So that gives me 2 win rates, last year and this year. I'm going to hide my other columns that I don't need. Well, those haven't happened yet, right? Because they're forward looking for this year. So what I can do is I can now plot them as a timeline chart. I'm going to make a couple of improvements to put this together. So small multiples means it's separate charts. I'm going to put them together on a single axis so they line right up. And then we can just change and put them right there. So now it's much easier to see how we did this year compared to the same time period last year. Those with eagle eyes may also notice that for January, I don't have a value for last year. It's blank on this chart. Well, we can fix that by heading back to the compare table. And what happens is we didn't have any one opportunity. So our formula actually evaluates to null. You can't divide by 0. So we could change this. We could do a case statement. Case when A equals 0, then 0, else round. And my formula is actually going to err because I did something wrong, and you need to have things capitalized. The other thing that we can do is you can actually use a coalesce statement. Coalesce will take any of those instances where it's null. And put them with a value that we specified. So if you can ignore my typo for a second, it will change to the right spelling of coalesce. And you'll notice that we'll end up with a 0 for win rate. So that's one of the dashboards that we can, one of the charts that we can use in the dashboard to build out that final one. The other thing that we can do is we could look at the overall win rate. So if we close this and actually remove our grouping, what happens is all of our year data will be summed up into 2 values. We can then use this compare table once the close date month disappears in some of our number widgets. So in number widgets, you can do KPIs directly inside of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to my number widget. Actually, I'll skip that for now. But what I want to show you is Jesse's point earlier about all those zeros for the rest of the year. That 37.5 isn't exactly a fair number because it's counting opportunities that are projected to close, but how could it close in July when July hasn't happened yet? So we need to make one adjustment to our date filter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the JSON for a moment, only because the Explorer doesn't let you change the dates the same way that you can on the dashboard. That's doing Control E if you're on a PC or Command E if you're on a Mac. I'm going to come down to the date filter for this year. And what I'm going to do is instead of going from year 0 to year 0, I'm going to change that to day 0. What day 0 means is today. So it's only going to consider opportunities with a close date up to today. And there we are, a more realistic 51.6%. So a couple of places where you need to think about what you're filtering because it can cause a problem with data. Up to this point, we've been looking a lot at some of the simpler functions inside of the compare table, but there's some more powerful functions that we have available too. I'm going to start a new compare table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a sum of amounts. I'm going to group by account name. Now I'll add a second column and go to the formula editor. You may have noticed earlier there's this f of x dropdown. What this does is this gives us a more powerful functions. These are what's known as windowing functions, where you can actually look beyond just the current row of data. We're going to go through a couple of these, but I'm going to start with the rank within group. It does kind of exactly what you would think. It's going to rank your data based off of something. So in this case, what I can do is I can rank the data based off of the sum of amounts. And you'll see where each of these accounts falls. Now, what's more interesting is if we jump out of the ranking, we can go to that column and we can actually sort by it. So what it'll do is it'll bubble up all of our top accounts to the top of the list. And we can see for that time period, who's our top accounts. Now, this is also true within groups. So if we were to add something like industry, we could actually rank within industry and reset each time we get to a different industry. So we could easily see what are our top 10 accounts in pharmaceuticals, what are our top 10 in financials. So then let's go ahead and change this account name and go over to close date. Do you have the name of that? Yeah. So edit this column up at the top. We could call it rank, and we would be good to go. So I'm going to add in a couple of things. I'm going to add in the close date month and the close date year. And I still have my ranking there. So what you'll see is the data kind of gets out of calendar order because it's ranking based off of those particular groups. So what we could do is we could edit this column. Now, what you're going to see when it first comes up is actually a little bit of SACL, because what happens is that f of x editor writes SACL for you. We're not going to look at it. I promise no SACL, but just know that that's what's going on there. So we could change our rank within group, and we could just make it reset on the close date year. And then we'll get a ranking based off of the different values inside of there. All right, so at this point, let's take close date year off of the grid. And what I want to show you is that sometimes you can make a change, and it's actually a change that the system isn't going to let you do. So the formula is invalid because it's referencing close date year. So I tried to remove a grouping that's being used in one of my columns. The system will warn me that, hey, you're making a mistake, and then you just can click the undo change, and it'll take you back to where you were. I'm going to clear the sort, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to edit this column because we're going to look at some of the other ranking functions. One of the ones that I like is running total. Running total will give us an idea of how each of our month of our sales has contributed to the particular year. So if I were to apply this right away, with the TV going off at 7 o'clock, so I just did ranking without a reset group. And what you'll see is when we get to January of this year, the number just keeps going. It doesn't reset back to 0. But we can fix that by going to a close date year. And then this is another one of my charts. So we'll actually switch over to chart mode and be able to put these things side by side so we can see how each month contributed individually, but then how our total sales have done for the year. The last thing I did was I changed the labels to fit so that everything fit on the screen. The next piece to look at from a functions perspective is to look at the period over period change. So much like we looked before, we've kind of put this year and that year together in different lines. We could do that instead as a windowing function. So we can look at a change year over year. And what you'll notice is everything for 2016 kind of blanks out because there isn't a prior year to look at. But we can see for February that our sales are 200% over where they were last February. The other option is to do just the regular month over month change. So if we come back to the compare option and switch it, it'll take one month to the next and show us how those things have changed. Again, we can put this together in a chart and put it on our dashboard. The last item to show you is how we can build a min-max average and overall average chart all together with one set of value. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my column. I'm going to remove my groupings, and I'm going to change sum of amount to the average amount. And filter just to my 1 records. I'm going to add the max of amounts. And if you notice that you can actually kind of stick columns in the middle if you want. So if you forget to put something, it's not a problem. We can add min of amount. And you'll notice when I change min of amount, I actually picked max again, sorry. The filter at the bottom gets cleared. So if you pick different columns, you need to be aware that your filters will no longer apply. We can do 1 equals true. And in this case, we're going to group this by industry. So I want to add one more formula column. It's going to be my overall average. I'm going to use a sliding window. I'm going to illustrate kind of the first piece, which is I'm going to take the average column and the sliding window. You can use negatives or positives to know whether you want to look behind or ahead. So if you've ever been asked to do like a 3-month running average, well, you can put a -2 in here, and you'll take the value before and your current value and average them together. So if I just were to apply it the way it looks now, it's going to take the 600,000 and the 1.8 million, add them together for 16 million, and you get 845,000. You notice for the first period where there isn't any values, it actually will just take that one value and put it together. So my trick here is I'm actually going to empty out start and end. I'm going to put my cursor in, delete the values, and there's nothing there. So when I apply now, I actually will get the overall average across the whole data set. I'm going to use that. So one of the things we could look at just to show you the overall average, if I remove my grouping for a second, the data will sum up and we have 1 million and some change for the average amount and 1 million and the change for the overall amount. So they match. You may ask, well, why is it a little bit different? Why is it 50,000 off? Well, I have some opportunities that are linked to accounts that do not have an industry. If they don't have an industry, they're not going to be in there when I group by industry. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this together on a combo chart. And what it will do is it'll give me kind of a view of where my opportunities lie, how each industry is doing versus the overall average. And just to make this a little bit easier for you to see, if I jump down to the left axis, I can put this on a log scale. It'll bring my data up, and then you can see where the bottom minimum opportunities are, average opportunities, overall average, and then the maximum. So nice little visualization, all powered by the compare table. So as you can see, the compare table has a lot of power. We built quite a few dashboards with complex calculations and didn't write any code with it. One of the nice things about using the compare table, if I jump back to my dashboard, when you have a compare table, these steps are fully explorable. And what I mean by that is you can use the drop down and you can click on explore, and it will put you in an editor where instead of looking at one grouping like industry, we could change and look at something else like lead source. If you write SACL, yes, you can get to explore mode, but a user can't change the groupings, they can't interact with the data, they can just hide or add the columns or excuse me, they could just change the different types of charts. So by keeping it in compare tables, you have this exploring capabilities. I do have a few resources for you. I don't have it yet, but before Midwest Dreaming in August, I'll have a write-up on my blog that has details about this. I'll also have an unmanaged package with an analytics app template. What that lets you do is it actually lets you install all my examples into your own org. It'll run the data flow, and then you'll have all the dashboards there that you can work with. From Trailhead's perspective, there's sign up to get your own dev org that's analytics enabled. There's a lot of trails on Einstein, and then links to the functions and the windowing functions that we looked at. Any questions before we wrap things up? And I see a picture coming, so I'll go back to the slide if you didn't get it. All right. Any questions on the compare table or analytics in general?
Does it work with anything other than opportunity? Can I do a custom object?
Yep, absolutely. So you can pull in data really from anywhere you want. I picked opportunity because most people have it in their org, so it's a good example. But the app that I built called Reveal, it pulls in all custom objects. We actually don't use any of the Salesforce standard objects inside of our solution.
You can still do stuff like saying, okay, I want to see last year.
All those same things apply, and in fact, if you have multiple dates in your data set, you can do it on different dates at a time. So for our real estate use cases, we might have things like when a lease starts and when a lease ends. We can use all those different dates in the same type of functions and functionality. The other thing that's cool is all this functionality, it's available to you as developers as well too through an API. So you can actually call into Wave to have it execute queries and get back results and do things with it. So you can put that in Lightning components and have it interact with Wave dashboards. You can build classes that run from Process Builder in order to see if this is a certain amount of volume over the past year, well, we should do this with this account. All those type of things are possible because the API is exposed to do that. So, a lot of power. All right, well, thank you, and I will